25 days to go until a potential hard out for the UK, potential no-deal Brexit on the way. The markets seem remarkably calm. Are we underestimating, actually, the potential of what is about to happen?
Well, look at sterling, 123, it's just sitting this out.
Yep.
And clearly it could go in either direction. If you have a hard Brexit, it's clearly going to go down quite a lot. I mean, there's some estimates that it could go down close to parity. On the upside, that's if you have a deal. And of course, sterling could do a lot better in that. And it's a long way away from either of those events. It's sort of sitting in the middle of ground until it decides which way to go, bearing in mind some of the huge uncertainties about where Brexit's going.
The data more broadly, though, are turning quite negative, both in the UK and in Europe. The Bank of England is starting to be priced, regardless of the Brexit outcome, for a cut. Do you think that's right?
Well, there's been a huge move, particularly since the middle of September, in what markets are pricing. If you look at short sterling, for example, that's shifted by probably 25, 30 basis points in favour towards a cut over the course of the next year. So it's a big move. And it's probably understandable. I mean, you saw this morning, for example, we had some weak retail sales numbers in the UK. We've had some very soft PMIs. And as you say, that's not just the case in the UK, it's also in Europe. But it's also worth bearing in mind that these PMIs are not signalling outright recession, but they are signalling zero growth, which is something which the Bank of England normally would respond to by cutting interest rates. Now, we have a rate hike, would you believe, in our forecast, and the reason for that is because we're expecting a deal. All of our forecasts are predicated on a deal. And if you get a deal, you could see a boost in investment, you could see consumer spending do quite well, sterling will go up. There's a lot of things which would be positive from a deal, but whether it would be enough now to turn this around is questionable.
So are we seeing it in employment yet, George? Because it's one thing to see it in the PMIs, but at least in the US, we're not seeing it so much in employment.
No, we saw the last Friday's labour market report, absolutely. And in the UK and in Europe, labour markets are exceptionally strong. You have unemployment rates at the lowest they've been in generations. In the UK, for example, in Germany, we've seen falls pretty much everywhere. Spain has seen a huge fall in its unemployment rate over the last few years, which has obviously supported consumer spending. And consumer spending has done quite well. The Bank of England has recognised this in its inflation report. It keeps saying that consumer spending quite resilient. Obviously, data to challenge that over the last 24 hours, but we certainly have seen consumers being the sort of linchpin of what's supporting this economy. And if that is undermined, for example, if you see higher unemployment, lower employment wages peaking out and then starting to slow, then of course there is a huge downside risks associated with that. But so far, the slowdown has been relatively slow. Look at Europe, for example. We've seen a fall in growth, but it has not been an outright collapse. Typically, cycles, and particularly down cycles in the economy, happen much quicker than what we've seen this time around.
Right. Now, I'm curious as to how quickly we will see a change. If, for example, there's a no deal at the end of October. I mean, unless something happens between now and then, there will be a no deal, right, George?
Well, it's going to be very difficult given the legislation and notwithstanding the decision of the Scottish court today. I think it's going to be very difficult for Mr Johnson to circumvent these rules, this Benn Act, which requires him to write a letter asking for an extension. There are ways to do this trivially, of course. He can probably get somebody else to write the letter, or he can blame it on Parliament. But the point is, he might have some ruse to do this, but at the moment it's very difficult to see exactly how he's going to do it. And he keeps saying that we are going to leave on the 31st of October, but they're also going to obey the Benn Act. And it's very difficult to square that circle. It's exceptionally difficult to see how he's going to achieve both of those.